I think we have this idea that maybe we get to a point in our lives where we feel like, done. I fixed all the things I needed to fix. I went to therapy. I worked through all of my childhood things. I'm not triggered by anything anymore. I have no traumas. I'm engaging with my partner, my children, my friends with no issues. Everything's resolved. I'm doing great. And that time never comes. And it doesn't matter if you talk to a 15-year-old or a 95-year-old. Everyone is still in this evolving space, and everyone still feels like they're making teenage mistakes. Everyone still feels like they can't quite figure it out. And I think it's one of the great equalizers of all of us. And also, I think it takes a lot of work to release the expectation or this dream that one day you're going to arrive.
That was Rabbi Hannah Jensen, one of the rabbis at our shul, Ikar. Our conversation was inspired by the song Worth Decanting, which was itself inspired by Psalm 25. I'm Shep Rosenman, and this is The Rest is Commentary, where we explore what songs inspired by the Psalms or Tehillim inspire in my guests. Rabbi Jensen is the assistant rabbi and director of community organizing at Ikar in Los Angeles. She has an incredible heart, warmth, and presence, and was ordained by the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in 2023. She spent many years working with B'nai Mitzvah students, involved in community organizing leadership, working with adults learning Hebrew, and always trying to meet new people. Rabbi Jensen spent 2.5 years working as a spiritual counselor at Beit Teshuvah, a residential addiction treatment center, and did fellowships with Truah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, and the New Israel Fund. When not engaging in a variety of Jewish injustice work, Rabbi Jensen loves walking. Yes, people walk in L.A., discovering new donut shops, writing, and the moon. Connect with her at Rabbi Jensen, Jensen, at ikar.org. We discuss the importance of mistakes, vulnerability, and forgiveness, how extending grace creates real connection, differentiating between friendship and relationship as a rabbi, the tension between discomfort and safety, creating space for each other in relationships of any type, the importance of continuing to grow, and so much more. Let's begin by listening to Worth Decanting.
Sometimes my brain still slumbers. I am kind of a kid. Want things clear and simple. There's right and wrong and clouds of gray. Galaxy of words to say. Squeeze the world in a thimble. Guide me back to you. Forgive my mistakes. I do hope they're few. Guide me back to you. Holding hands and ranting, poured the wine when our hearts ached. Streetlight dances, videotaped, moments worth decanting. Guide me back to you. Forgive my mistakes. I do hope they're few. ascending without straining. Now I wish I had been told that others should not be controlled, and love requires training. Guide me back to you. Forgive my mistakes. I do hope they're few. Guide me back to you. I do hope they're few. Guide me back to you.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So I'm going to start us off with one question, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there.
Great.
In the same way that I was inspired to write this, and my personal view is that every creative act is it's a gift from the muses, a gift from God. So I feel like I received a gift. I offered you a bunch of songs. You chose this one. And so this one was your gift. Like in our family, we let people choose their gifts. So I'm hoping that just as the song was inspired by reading this to Tehillim, that it inspired something in you. And I'm wondering whether that's love, loathing, questions, curiosity, hatred, hope, whatever it is, I want to talk about it.
It definitely was not hate or loathing, so we can get those out of the way. I think that from the first time I heard it, there was something in it that I wanted to know more about. So I listened to it a few times, and then I started to kind of get a sense of it more. And I didn't actually look at the lyrics for a while. And so I could hear them, but I think it's very different to hear them than to see them because you kind of sort of get it, but you need to see it up front and up close. And I think then I really had this other sense of it. And I think the first thing that really struck me was just this fixation on mistakes and on errors. And I think in the Psalm, it's about our relationship with God. But I think for me, the first thing I thought of was just our relationships in life with anyone in our lives and with self, and how much we fixate on errors and mistakes and falling short, and the ways that can hold us back in the world or in our relationships. And so I think that the first thing that came to me was just really this idea of mistakes. And I think that's the thing that really caught me from the beginning. There's even verse 7, I think. It says, Chata'ot ne'orai ufashai al tizkor. So don't worry or don't remember my youthful sins. So I think mistake isn't really a word that would have been used in that way, but I think sin or falling short or these things show up in these ways. And that then there's this focus in the Psalm on having God show you God's ways and kind of get you back on track in some way. And there's an early verse about God not being disappointed or being embarrassed even in the second verse. And so I think that that does really come out from the Psalm, but it was interesting because I listened to the song before I went back to the Psalm. And so I was piecing it together almost backward. I saw where you had gone, and then I was seeing where it came from, which was a really fascinating way to do it, I think, because then I thought, oh, wow, what you saw in it or what inspiration you took from it may have been very different from what someone else would have seen in it. But I think that focus to me was such an accessible one and such an emotional one in some ways, because I think you are more familiar with the Psalms than most people at this point, probably. But I think one of the things about the Psalms is that they can feel so esoteric in some ways and so inaccessible. And I know a lot of people who just don't even try to read the Psalms because they feel like, what am I going to get out of this strange psalm? And I think it's really a gift to put them into language that people can actually hear and that resonate with people. And so for me, the choice or the inspiration or however you want to understand it to focus on my mistakes and hoping that there weren't that many of them or hoping that they weren't that big, to me was such a powerful message.
Well, so like for me, first of all, when Sherry Hirsch was here, do you know Sherry? So she's like, I can't stand the Psalms. So that was like her first obstacle. And we had a whole conversation about how the Psalms can be accessible if you're willing to kind of dive into this language that is not easy to read. Mm-hmm. It is accessible from many of the themes, you know, I guess for people who don't believe in God, that's a barrier that's hard to get through. But all the themes, you know, the psalmist's pain, the psalmist's fear, the psalmist's joy. I mean, it all comes up. These are things we can connect to. And ultimately, that's what I'm seeking to do with this project, find ways of connecting. And, you know, for me, like every time I sit down with one of these, I could probably write 150 songs for each psalm, you know. So for this one, Psalm 25, this is the second time I'm discussing a song based on Psalm 25. The other one was a song that I wrote with my friend Ray Allen Kayanik, and my discussion partner was Rabbi Brous.
Wow.
So you guys have that connection.
That is so fascinating.
This is like the Ikar Psalm.
Well, you have to interview all of them and see what the other ones choose, because there aren't any other 25 left. That's so interesting.
But I'm trying as much as I can to come up with new songs so that I hit all 150. I forget to put things on the list, so I don't know where I am. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But that's a good example. I mean, forgetfulness is a form of a mistake. Mm. And I moved to mistake rather than sin because I can't handle the idea of sin, capital S.
Yeah.
And I don't know that a sin, hate is not necessarily sin. Mm-hmm. It's just how we translate it. Mm-hmm. And I suspect if you look, you know, what's the source of a sin? Well, you know, you were supposed to do X, you didn't do X, or you did Y when you're not supposed to do Y. Why is that different than a mistake? I mean, to the extent it's bemazed. Intentional. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, maybe that's not a mistake. Although if you have regret afterwards, then the intention was the mistake.
Right.
And so I think that comes up every day in every way in every relationship. Yeah. And I often try to write these so that they operate on multiple levels. Mm-hmm. You know, guide me back to you could be a conversation with God. I think that's language from the Tehillim, the Psalm. Yeah. But it could also be, okay, Sherry and I have had a fight. My kids and I have had a fight. How do we come back together? Mm-hmm. In fact, when, you know, there was a period where Maya was struggling with some mental health issues, and we just didn't know how to connect with her. We didn't know how to talk to her. So this notion of guide me back to you, she gave us specific language. Don't say this, say that. Mm-hmm. And the power of being able to do that, to stay connected even in tension, what a gift that is for a then 16, 17-year-old with her therapist's help to be able to say to us, I can't handle when you say it this way, but I can hear the same thing if you say it this other way.
You know, the presuming the best intentions of people, or at least giving them some benefit of the doubt, I think is happening less and less in the world. And I think that it's very easy to jump to conclusions, often to bad conclusions about people or things in the world. And I think in this moment, especially when it feels like the world is getting more and more polarized, more and more radicalized in certain ways, that it feels like there are groups, there are teams, and either you're on my team or you're against me. And there's no nuance in that conversation, and there's no space to actually have a conversation because you've already written that person off because of something you heard or saw or someone else told you about what that person thought or said or felt, that doesn't actually leave space to be in any kind of relationship with people, which is not to say that we're all going to get along and see the world the same way, and which is not to say that there are people who don't deserve the benefit of the doubt and who don't deserve that kind of grace. But I think we cut people off so quickly from that.
Yeah.
And I think especially when we're hurt, we are much less able to extend any kind of compassion or grace or
Sure.
benefit of the doubt to other people. And I think that this kind of interpretation of the psalm, I think, is this vulnerable ask in some ways that someone is making of someone else, which is, give me the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
See me as a flawed person, just like all of us, but understand that I'm learning and I'm growing.
Yeah.
And as opposed to, you're right, I'm a terrible person and everything that I've ever said or done is bad. But I think we do that to ourselves. And also more and more in the world, we see people doing that to each other. And I think that this is an invitation into a kind of more nuanced space and more complex understanding of what it means to be in relationship, and that it's always going to involve mistakes and falling short.
Yeah. Look, there's so much richness in what you just said. Randomly, I'm going to pick this one because it's the first one that came to mind. In preparing for our conversation, I went back and I pulled up my old songwriting notes. I'm very process oriented. Some people, they have this gift of nevuah, of prophecies. Like, they open their minds, words come out. And every once in a while, like, I will find that, like, my first draft is pretty close to my final draft. This was not one of them. This was very process oriented. It was, I read the psalm, I pulled out the language that moved me, and I then did a whole bunch of journaling in kind of lyric poetry format. And one of the lines that I wrote was, complexity and nuance are not acceptable in this country. We're like kids in that way. And I think that that's where the lyric
teenage blunders comes from.
I'm kind of a kid.
Yeah.
And I think that we resort back to that. You mentioned hurt, but fear and anger.
Yeah.
And either of those can be connected to hurt. But fear and anger are strong prompters. And in this moment, the extreme right and the extreme left are pushing agendas that make their polar opposites and everyone in between very afraid and very angry. So that cuts off the conversation right there. And the same is true about Israel, especially now. We're having this conversation on day 187. Am I getting that right? Yeah. Day 187 that the hostages have been in Gaza, that the war has been going on. And not everybody has the same views on this, and our rabbi has a very nuanced view, and people only hear one part of it or the other, and she gets crap from both sides for that reason. I think anyone who studies Gemara, the Talmud, and anyone who has done a lot of legal research, and this is probably true in other fields as well, but I'm focusing on those because those are my areas of experience. You learn how to look at something from different angles and to allow for alternative perspectives, even if you disagree with them. And that's something that we've lost.
Oh, absolutely. I think part of it too is we've conflated discomfort with being unsafe. And so I think that, and Rabbi Brous, who you've mentioned, also in her recent book that came out, The Amen Effect, she kind of speaks to this, but that we've labeled anyone who disagrees with us, or not anyone, but most people who disagree with us, as being an unsafe environment for us to enter into conversation, as opposed to, as you're saying, okay, I'm creating the space for conversation with people who I may not agree with, and some of that might make me uncomfortable, and I'm going to be okay.
Right.
That discomfort doesn't threaten me physically or mentally or emotionally, but that it just isn't what I would choose for myself, or not the way that I see the world, but that we've lost the ability to sit in that discomfort because of real threats, I think, that exist in the world, and not being able to tell necessarily where am I actually safe and just uncomfortable, and where am I unsafe.
Yeah, I love that distinction. I think it's really powerful. I actually want to take it farther in two ways.
Mm-hmm.
One, I would say that it is incumbent upon us when in any productive discomfort to lead with curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if we lead with curiosity, then the fear goes away, right? It's, if you will, it's opposite action. Another more language I learned from Maya, right? You want to step away, lean in and be curious. So that's one thing. And the other thing that your words struck in me are that I think social media, there's tremendous value in it. I have a gig coming up in a week. I posted it on social media. So there's lots of positivity that comes up in that. But because of, I think it's called the meaningful algorithm, we end up being directed to the posts that the algorithm says are meaningful to us,
right,
rather than
siloed.
A curiosity algorithm, which says, here's a different perspective. And I think that it's only gotten worse. And it goes back to, I forget the name of the case, but so there's a milestone decision that was made, or a milestone legislation that created TV and cable as we know it, the losing of the FinCEN rules, the lack of a requirement of balance, all of that just paved the way for the much more extreme version on social media. And I think people tend to, I don't think that there's kavana here. I don't think that there's mazid. It's not intentional. I think people just kind of habituate to what's in front of them. If there are French fries in the fridge, you're going to eat French fries. If there's salad, you're going to eat salad, at least some of the time. I don't know that this is a realistic recipe, but if the world were up to me, for every post you read that was extreme left wing, you'd also get one that's center and extreme right, just so you understand the issue from three perspectives, or 5 or 10, whatever it is. And I think that that's how you become educated. And that's the brilliance of Chavrusa, right? Because Reish Lakish died, and Rabbi Yochanan, they were Chavrusas, they were study partners. So in his death, the yeshiva, the academy, brought him different Chavrusas to learn with and console him in his time of grieving. And, the first guy came along and Rabbi Yochanan would say, oh, well, this is the law. And the study partner would say, you're right. And get me a new study partner, bring another guy. Same thing would happen. You're right. And finally, Rabbi Yochanan articulates, for every argument I came up with, Reish Lakish would come up with 100 counterpoints.
Exactly.
Because the whole point is refine each other's understanding. It's not about me being right or you being right, but together we come to a greater understanding. And we could come up with different conclusions, but we've refined each other in the process.
Yeah.
And to me, that's ultimately what all these processes are about, whether in a marriage, parent-child relationships, close friends. You have to be able to have uncomfortable conversations. Even lawyers who should know how to do it, they just go to the ugly place instead of just engaging in healthy debate.
Yeah. And I think we have both lost it in a more professional, more expansive, global way. And we've also lost it interpersonally, because I think we're not practicing it as much. And so I think we are quicker to feel unable to engage in hard conversations, even with the people closest to us, because I think we're seeing less modeling of that in the world, and we're exposed to less of that ourselves, because, as you said, we're seeing kind of all the news that we're seeing, or all the updates we're seeing, are confirmation of what we already believe or have seen or know. And so we aren't expanding ourselves in those ways. And so then if your partner, child, sibling, close friend sees something differently from you, it also feels like a threat.
Yeah.
We've really lost the ability, even in those relationships, to maintain, as you said earlier, maintain connection in that kind of tension.
There's also someone close to me is going through this. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to make the subject of this uncomfortable.
Sure.
But I'm the type of person who appreciates it when people share articles, whatever, just like I'll read it, or a podcast. If my friend or family member was moved by something, I want to understand that because it connects me to them.
Yeah.
Even if I ultimately disagree with it, that's an opportunity for conversation.
Right.
But this other person in my life has been sending articles to friends and getting radio silence in response. And they talk to several of the people that they've been sending articles to. And, one's like, I'm too busy. One's like, I don't agree with you. And one's like deeply threatened by the articles. And because this person was willing to raise the issue, they sourced all of those answers.
Right.
But the people that were receiving the articles did not feel strong, healthy, secure enough to come back and say, please don't send them to me. Or please do send them to me. Just know that, they're a little bit threatening, right? Like just whatever it is. And I think that that's just a malady right now. We've lost the art of being able to simply just talk to each other. Look, my parents, they fought with a lot of people, mostly family members, some customers too. And even though my dad did it inartfully, he always raised the issue because maintaining the connection was most important. That was the dominant value. He would write letters. He would confront people angrily. He'd also have gentle conversations. Like I got those. I think I got more of those than my brother. My brother got more anger. So you were talking about modeling, like it starts right here, right at home. And I think that, some of the challenge may be that we live in these massive communities. Ikar is a massive community, right?
More and more by the day. It feels like, so. Yeah.
So even like we were just talking about this before we started, the Zoom minion for Ikar is 50 people. And it's a rotating 50 people. It's not the same 50 people every day. You see some of the same people every day. And when you're very intentional, you build relationships within that community. But that's a subset of a subset, the Zoom minion, Ikar, which is a subset of the Jewish community in Los Angeles, a subset of the community in Los Angeles. It's hard to stay on top of all these relationships. You have to have kavanah and keva. You have to have intention and a routine where you stay connected and in play, in curiosity with other people, where you together choose a measure of unsafety with a goal of productive discomfort and perhaps learning.
I think also, I really hear what you're saying. I think some of it is that we are now able, because of technology, to be connected to so many people that we don't have the capacity or the ability to build deep relationships in the same ways. Because, we really all should live in a community of 100 people,
Right.
maybe 150 people. And I know everything about those people.
Right.
They know everything about me. We raise our kids together. We go through our life cycle events together. We cry with each other. We laugh with each other. And you can't do that on the scale of 8 billion people in the world.
No.
But that's sort of where we are. That's sort of what's being asked of us. And so, of course, we don't know how to be safe with each other anymore because we're now exposed to so many people who are now, quote unquote, part of our communities, but we don't know those people. And
Right.
as you mentioned, even in our community where I'm a rabbi, there are people who come up to me all the time who know things about me or the sermon I gave or this event that's happening. I've never seen them in my life. And that's just, as you said, in a community that's sort of fixed that's fairly small in the scheme of things in the world, but already we aren't able to maintain the same kind of depth of relationships, even in that community, because as it's gotten bigger, there are only so many of us and so many people in the community. And even as you said with this morning minion, this Zoom community, there are the people you know day in and day out. And then there are the people whose mom died last week who just started coming and no one's seen them before, or someone who comes once and never again. Are we accountable to them? Would we feel safe to be in community with them or in conversation with them? And there's a beauty in the expansiveness of that. And I also think that we lose something because we're pulled so many directions.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of why we struggle on a global scale with everything that's happening in the world, because we can't actually psychologically as human beings maintain the same kinds of empathy and connection and compassion for every single crisis and conflict and problem in the world, because we weren't built that way.
Right.
We were built to carry the emotional weight of the 150 people around us, but not the 8 billion people in the world. And so, of course, everyone is exhausted, depleted, depressed, really struggling to engage in the world, because everywhere you look, you're being attacked by all sorts of new information about this crisis or that crisis.
Yeah.
And this is the most important thing, and this is the most important thing, and this is the most important thing. And you're just maybe trying to get through the day. Yeah. You're just trying to get your kids to school and pick them up and feed them and get yourself to work and shower and maybe exercise and eat something. And you already are just trying to manage your own small life and maybe a few friends and family around you. And then also you're supposed to know every detail of every crisis happening in the world. And that's supposed to be top of mind for you forever.
Yeah.
Of course, we aren't able to maintain that. And also, I think it means we don't have as much space for deep relationships in the way that we did before. It
reminds me, what you're saying reminds me a lot of the way the Rambam, Maimonides, a 12th century scholar, talks about how you give charity. You know, first you give to your closest inner circle. I don't remember if he says family or your geographic location, but it's your closest inner circle. And then, you know, if you have money left over, you go to the circle around that, and then the circle around that, and the circle around that. And, you know, so we go from 8 billion to the 100 or 120. And that's true of friendships too. You know, like we, Sherry and I know you, this is true of you as well, we're blessed with a lot of friends. You know, but then there are those who are our closest friends, you know, the people without whom you would have trouble functioning, the people you rely on most. And that's true even though there's this other layer of people to whom you feel very close and who feel very close to you, who will show up when you ask them to or whom you show up for. But there's only so much time, there's only so much emotional bandwidth. And the more under attack we feel outside, this is true of me. I'm one of those introvert extroverts. The more under attack I feel outside, the more I have to huddle and just be in my safe space, which is this room or anywhere else in the house, but particularly this room. But I also, b'chavana, with intention, have to push myself to, you know, Rabbi Browse, Sharon, talks about just showing up. You know, since reading her book, Sherry and I have been trying as much as we can to just show up. It's such a simple but powerful concept. And the way she talks about it is very moving, very inspiring. You know, we were at a shiva with her the other night, and there were 100 people, you know, just showing up for this family. There are neighbors. I don't know the mom who passed, but what a legacy, what a life, you know. And had I not shown up, I neither would have felt like I did right by my neighbor, nor would I have heard about this incredible life. Right. So just showing up isn't only about the other person, like there's a benefit to you too. And that's sometimes hard to remember. So I want to actually talk about the friend thing for a minute, if you're okay with this. Yeah. You're in a unique position. Okay. Like I get slices of it as a songwriter, like when I'm performing, when I offer my songs to people feel like they know me.
Mm-hmm.
But as a rabbi, there are, I don't know how many, 2,500 members at IKAR?
Probably, yeah. 1,200 families, but a family unit could be all sorts of
Right,
things.
so 3,000 people
Yeah.
that you have some achraya, some responsibility towards. And I'll bet you dollars to donut that everyone thinks you're their friend. Right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage that? Right? Because you have to do it in a way that the congregants feel respected and connected while still also protecting yourself by not revealing information that you don't want to, by not sharing stuff that crosses a line in some way. So how do you manage that?
It's a great question. Some days are easier than others. I think I'm a pretty private person, and so it's a strange life for me in some ways. And I joke, but it's not really a joke. It's true. Before this year, I was only searchable on Google if you went to the 4th page of Google. I was nowhere to be found on Google. I had almost no internet history. I was just a specter in some ways. And now everything I've ever said in the last 9 months is on the internet. Every sermon I've given, all of our Shabbat services are still on YouTube. Everything I've said in a Shabbat service, every mistake I've made, everything I've said wrong, all of it is for posterity forever on the internet. And that's a very strange feeling, probably a strange feeling for anyone, but I think especially the contrast of the life I had before with this one.
Sure.
And so I think if anything, my struggle in some ways is sharing more as opposed to holding myself back from sharing, because I think my comfortable place is not sharing about myself. And I'll just give a couple examples. I was writing a sermon for Rosh Hashanah, and I felt like I was in pretty good shape. And I brought it to Rabbi Brous, and I read it to her. And at the end, she said, "Where are you in the sermon?" And I said, "Well, it's not really about me," because I knew that there were 2 other sermons that were being given that were very personal to the rabbis who were giving them. And so I had purposely constructed this sermon that wasn't about me. And she said, "I understand it's not about you. It's not all about you, but you need to bring yourself into it. It doesn't need to be pages about you, but say something personal. It doesn't need to be divulging secret information or things that you don't want shared, but you need to connect with people. And right now, there's no way in for people." And I was so frustrated because I felt like, oh no, now I have to go back to the beginning and try to figure out how do I weave myself into this in a way that doesn't feel too much disclosure and also allows people to connect with me. And I think I was able to do that in the end, but I had to be pushed to do that. And so I think I almost err, I think, on the side of not sharing much of myself. And part of my work also in our community is I work with people in their 20s and 30s. And that's especially tricky because I am in that age group. And so I have worked very hard to create boundaries for myself around what does that look like? How do I show up in those spaces? What do I wear in those spaces? Which I think as a woman is something I think about a lot in my professional life, but especially in that context. I only introduce myself as Rabbi Jensen in all of those work contexts. I think a lot of people knew me before I was a rabbi and feel like they are more comfortable and casual with me than I think I feel with them. And so that boundary has been really important for me. And I think people in the community have been really good on the whole about helping me step into that identity and helping me separate what is a workspace versus what is a personal space. And that helps me a lot, actually, because no one in my personal life calls me Rabbi Jensen. None of my friends do it as a joke because they know that. But at work, it's really important for me to differentiate those spaces. And so that helps me, I think, stay in the space that I'm in. And then the other example I'll give is actually from this Shabbat. I gave a sermon and I spoke a little bit about my childhood, but in a very distant way. I was really talking about living in a place with seasons and the rituals that were created in my family. And I mostly was talking about my mom and these rituals. And someone came up to me after the sermon and said, "Really beautiful sermon. I loved that you brought it back to yourself. It was so great that you shared about yourself. And so it was this strange moment where I felt like, did I share about myself? I don't really feel like I shared anything about myself. I don't feel like you and I now have some connection we didn't have an hour ago. I feel like I gave a sermon and I told a very vague and simple story from being a child. So some of it also is figuring out what's enough to give people that's not dishonest, but that feels like some kind of connection point, some kind of humanity that also protects myself, protects my family, protects the people close to me, that I'm not divulging things that are not mine to share. And I think on such a big stage, I'm very aware of protecting myself and the people in my life. And also trying to do that in an authentic way is a little bit tricky.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, well, I guess I just never want to feel like I am performing in some kind of false way. I never want to feel like I'm putting something on, but I do think I'm a different self in some ways at work than I am even in this room or when I'm at home. And it's not a huge difference. I really try hard to just be who I am when I'm at work. But I think the things that I'm sharing and the ways that I'm sharing them are going to be different at work. And also, I want to make sure that I am me, that someone who meets me on a Shabbat morning is not going to be shocked to meet me on a Tuesday afternoon at the grocery store. I am the same person, but I think just trying to set boundaries that are clear enough for me, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, to know how I'm showing up in that space that may be a little bit different than how I would show up outside of it. But also, as we know, I think being a pulpit rabbi is really a life more than it's a job. And that's also a strange phenomenon in some ways. And I was taking a walk a couple months ago. It was probably 8 a.m. And I was wearing workout clothes. I was just taking a walk and I hear someone yelling at me. And I take my headphones off because I'm trying to figure out why someone's yelling at me at 8 a.m. And he says, "Hey, I think you're my rabbi." And I was very taken aback, as you can imagine. And then he said, "Well, one of my rabbis." I said, "Okay." And then we walked a couple blocks together and then he turned off to go home. But that happens a lot in my life now in a way that is very different from the private life that I had before and the kind of the control I had, I think, over my small life. And now that's a little bit it's a little bit outside of my control now. And I have made my peace with that. And so I control the things that I can control, which are the boundaries that I set, what I do and don't share, the ways that I engage with community members. And then if someone's going to yell at me at 8 a.m. when I'm taking a walk, that's just what's going to happen. Yeah. But I'm not going to stop taking a walk at 8 a.m. because I'm still going to create a space for my life, even if it sometimes leads to unexpected encounters.
A little bit reminds me of celebrity sightings at restaurants. You know, like, look, as an entertainment lawyer, I'm very sensitive to the celebrity perspective.
Right.
Because my clients will talk to me about what that's like. And by and large, they're generally very respectful, very open, but like there are limitations. How, when, where they just, you know, if it's a private birthday, on the one hand, the argument is, okay, a celebrity, including yourself, should know, you know, you're in the public space. So when people see you, you're going to be usually in a friendly way accosted. But on the other hand, like you're entitled to your privacy and there's a balance there. So like when I see celebrities, I'm generally like, I note it. If they make eye contact, then I will eye contact them too, but I won't go into their space unless it's a musician I happen to love. Then I will, you know,
make an exception.
Yeah. And then I'll like geek out and be my usual. Like when I sat at a bar with Adrian Ballou once, I totally geeked out with him. It was great.
Yeah.
I didn't really geek out when I ran into Andy Summers in our office. I just said, hello, I'm a fan. But that was choreographed by his lawyer. Andy Summers is going to be in the lobby at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning.
Right.
And she knew I was a big fan.
Yeah, it's definitely a very small version of that life. And our friend Rabbi David Kasher at some point said that being a pulpit rabbi is being very famous in one small room. And I think that's kind of how it is. I think anywhere else in the world, anywhere else in LA, I'm just a person. So I think I feel very grateful that I still have a private life and I don't feel like there are interruptions in my day-to-day life in the ways that.
Though as your career develops, that will be less and less true. I mean, even David, between his podcast and his book and now working for Hadar, he's in multiple rooms. People know him from lots of different walks of life. Sure. And that's true of Sharon, even though she has one pulpit, but between her book and, the Time Magazine Rabbi of the Year and being at the White House multiple times, like she's now on some level everybody's rabbi. And you may not want it, but I'm confident that as you continue to develop in your career, you're going to go beyond this particular room, even if you stay here for the rest of your life. Like some people have that thing, some people don't.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you're curious about or want to talk about?
There is something else from the song that I wanted to just touch on that I didn't have a chance to say before, which we talked about a little bit, I guess, but just in those first couple lines of the song, we talked earlier about kind of this childlike self and talking about teenage blunders. But I think one of the things that really struck me about that is that I think that's how we all feel forever. And I think we have this idea that maybe we get to a point in our lives where we feel like done. I fixed all the things I needed to fix. I went to therapy. I worked through all of my childhood things. I'm not triggered by anything anymore. I have no traumas. I'm engaging with my partner, my children, my friends with no issues. Everything's resolved. I'm doing great. And that time never comes. And it doesn't matter if you talk to a 15-year-old or a 95-year-old, everyone is still in this evolving space and everyone still feels like they're making teenage mistakes. Yeah. Everyone still feels like they can't quite figure it out. And I think it's one of the great equalizers of all of us. And also I think it takes a lot of work to release the expectation or this dream that one day you're going to arrive, but that instead you have to settle into this acceptance of I'm always going to have things. And the things I'm struggling with today are hopefully different from the things I struggled with 5 years ago and are hopefully different from the things I'm going to struggle with in 5 more years. Hopefully we're resolving some things along the way, but as long as you're in the world, things continue to be unresolved and then you resolve them. And that I think so much of our life is accepting the fact that we're always going to feel like a teenager who can't quite figure it out. And that our goal and our hope is to be in really meaningful relationships with people who allow us to fall short in those ways and give us the grace and the space to then come back from that and repair them and move forward, and that we can do the same for them. And I think that's really what the song and the psalm are saying, to me at least, which is this relationship is going to continue, and how do we continue to create space for each other to both fall short and be our best selves and everything in between, and that none of that is ever going to come to an end and none of that is ever going to be fully accomplished or resolved, but that our work is to stay in that gray.
Wow, that is beautiful. I almost don't want to say anything else because it's so beautiful. I don't want, but I have to, because I'm still in the spirit of Adar, the last Jewish month, V'nahafochu.
Yeah.
What rhymes with blunder? Wonder. Right. So I think that those two things go together. May we always recognize that the teenage blunder is always going to be part of us. Accept that, learn from it, recognize that when we're about to make one that we don't want to make, but also allow ourselves to make them. But in the same breath, teenage wonder. I mean, the first sunset you experience in romance, I think sunset's even in the song, right? Yeah. So, or sunrise, I don't remember. First time I woke up on a beach in Tel Aviv, having slept there for the night, I mean, I still feel the magic of that moment.
Yeah.
So may we also know teenage wonder.
Amen.
Thank you. This was great. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Rabbi Jensen for joining me, to Devin Schwartz for his help in producing this episode, to E. Rose for his help producing the song in this episode, to Jessica Hannah Sweetler for her help on social media, to Liat Silvera for designing the podcast logo. Please check out the incredible art on Liat's website at Liat, L-E-A-T, Silvera, SILVERA.com, and to my wife Shari, who challenges me in the best way and keeps me grounded daily. You can find Worth Decanting and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. It really helps if you review these episodes and share, like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast and to me as an artist on your favorite platforms. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking with my dear friend, mentor, teacher, rabbi, and chavrusa, Rabbi Yafa Epstein of the Jewish Education Project in New York. We discuss spiritual life holding both inner darkness and outer light. Prayer as a deeper search for meaning, not just a routine. Prayer working best when structure and spontaneity support each other. The moments before prayer as a part of prayer. Real growth meaning facing pain and doubt honestly. And so much more, all inspired by Yafa's thoughts after listening to Morning Prayer. Please join us.